Good evening, everyone. If everybody could take their seats, we'll get ready to start this community meeting. I want to thank everyone who's here for coming tonight, and for those who are watching online. We appreciate you participating. You'll have an opportunity to submit questions online that can be answered tonight. We have here representatives both from the Skinquarter Landfill and also from DEQ that will be here to do some short presentations and answer questions when we get to that later on. I know this has been a difficult for members of the community that live in the area that have been frustrated and quite frankly upset about the odor that's coming out of the landfill, and so hopefully we can get some good answers tonight and come up with perhaps a plan to mitigate that. So I'm going to turn it over to David Valdez from the Skinquarter Landfill.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll and county staff for hosting this meeting, and thanks to all the Chesterfield County residents who are attending both here and virtually. My name is David Valdez, and I'm the general manager and the licensed operator of Skinquarter Landfill, which is owned by WB Waste Solutions. As most of you know, we are a local C&D landfill located in Moseley, Virginia. With us tonight, sorry about that. Is that better? Okay. With us tonight and also representing WB Waste Solutions is Mr. Michael McGee, a managing partner. We also have Mr. Butch Joyce, who is with Labella Engineering. He's been integral with the permitting and consultation of the landfill since it was in concept. And we also have Paula Janziski, with an owner of Greenfin Studios, a media relations company specialized in environmental matters. So we're going to ask Ms. Paula to come up. She's got a brief presentation that she is going to.
See if I can turn this so I can see both. Does this work? Is that good? All right. Thank you all for having us here tonight. I'm going to give a little bit of background just on the site itself and give some information to hopefully facilitate some of the dialogue tonight. As Mr. Valdez just mentioned, this is a construction and demolition landfill located here in the county. It's part of WB Waste, which is a locally owned company, and they do waste management and recycling across the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. They've been in business for more than 17 years, and they employ over 400 people, and about 80 of those are Virginians. So the landfill and their services have several benefits to the communities where they are, including Chesterfield, processing debris from construction, the renovation, repair, demolition of different materials, roads and bridges, and by supporting economic development, it really helps the renovation process and buildings, businesses continue and expand. So they provide that vital, they create jobs and tax revenue for the surrounding community, and then the vital services for new home construction and growing businesses in the county by providing that recycling and disposal service for construction and demolition debris. One of their focus areas is in landfill diversion as well as recycling, and that's evident in their investments in some of these technologies across the region. They recently brought online a state-of-the-art technology center recycling facility with single-stream material in the DC, Maryland, Northern Virginia area with about a $6.5 million investment in that. It's the only private recycling center in that area for 30 plus years. So that was a new investment that they made in that area. Each year, about 75,000 tons of material are diverted through recycling and beneficial uses of those materials that otherwise would end up in a landfill. So that diversion is an important component of their business model. And they have plans to make similar investments in a recycling facility here in the county that would also offer landfill diversion and options with single stream and C&D materials recycling. So in terms of what they do accept, this provides a little bit of an overview of what can go into the landfill. They provide a final destination for lots of construction and demolition waste, but they only provide that comes from buildings, remodeling, demolitions of residential and commercial structures. So you can see sort of the array of things that they do allow here: concrete, glass, brick, pipes, carpeting, shingles, lumber. They do not accept municipal solid waste, industrial waste, regulated waste, coal ash, or asbestos. I'm just making sure I didn't skip one. So we do understand that the neighbors in this area have concerns about odors, and that's why we're here this evening to talk about that, and WB Waste takes those concerns very seriously. Odors can be present in landfills from the production and breakdown of materials used to create drywall, sheetrock, and other things like gypsum. This H2s, or hydrogen sulfide, does have that very distinct rotten egg smell, so it is detectable at very low concentrations. It's important to note that Skinquarter Landfill does not accept dedicated sheetrock disposal for their facility here. It's only what comes in as normal loads, and that on average is about 3 to 4% of what's going into any landfill. There are some sources of hydrogen, or several sources of hydrogen sulfide that we just wanted to talk about. It is produced through the bacterial breakdown of organic matter, and it can be found from human and animal waste breakdown, but also from new housing developments, sewer line installations, septic systems, sewage treatment plants around large bodies of stagnant water, and livestock areas. So there are lots of different sources in any different community for hydrogen sulfide, in addition to what might be other in Skinquarter or otherwise. It's used in other industries and is a byproduct of other processes, including other landfills, wood pulp processing, food processing, craft paper production, and rayon manufacturing. So there are various sources around. In terms of technology, WB Waste is investing in technology, not just for recycling, but also in terms of controlling odors and making sure that they're providing a service and controlling those odors on site. They have been testing, and they continue to test different gas scrubber systems and the filtration processes to make and find the best technology that fits for this site. There is currently a gas management system on site, and it pulls the gas out of the landfill, pulls it through a controlled environment, and then through a filtration system. So they are, as I said, they're still working, and will continue to work to find the most effective media and neutralizing agents that work for this site condition. And as I opened, the community really matters to WB Waste. They are part of the community. They are a locally owned company, and they're here tonight because they want to address your concerns, hear from you, and have a conversation. It's our community, it's their community as well, and we do take all of the concerns very seriously. So I hope that we can have a dialogue tonight about community concerns and what's happening, what you're seeing and smelling, and what can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula.
Okay, so what we'll do after the next presentation, we will have a question and answer session. We'll bring up the other presentation. John? Yep.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Good. All right. I wanted to thank Kevin for inviting DEQ to participate here this evening. Also wanted to let folks know that DEQ has a few folks in the audience as well. Doug Massini, who's our solid waste inspector for this facility, is here this evening. And then also James Golden, who's our regional director for the Piedmont Regional Office. And I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Sean Weimer. I'm the land protection manager for the Piedmont Regional Office for DEQ. And what that means is I work in our solid waste program. I manage our solid waste permitting and solid waste compliance programs. So we work directly with the landfill in that we issue permits for the landfill. We also perform compliance inspections at the landfill. This next slide, I just wanted to give folks an overview of the DEQ regional offices. We have 6 regional offices. I work in the Piedmont region, which is represented by yellow here on the map. We have 30 counties that we work with, including Chesterfield. In terms of DEQ's role at Skinquarter, the Virginia Waste Management Act and the Virginia Solid Waste Management Regs is what provides the driver for our authority as it relates to solid waste permitting and compliance. Skinquarter is a construction demolition debris landfill, which was mentioned earlier. Examples of CDD waste include lumber, wire, sheetrock, broken brick, shingles, glass, pipes, concrete, metals, plastic, and land clearing debris. Metals and plastics are allowed to be sent to the landfill as long as they're part of construction materials or they make up the containers that those materials were associated with. Municipal solid waste is not permitted at Skinquarter. That also was noted earlier. In terms of DEQ's involvement with the facility, they also have an industrial stormwater general permit, separate program, separate regulations, but they're also permitted via that VAR 05 permit, and that's associated with their industrial stormwater runoff that they have from the facility. Their solid waste permit number is 604, so that's the number that we use to track the permit. In terms of our inspections at the facility, we are generally performing quarterly inspections. Our last inspection was performed on February 7th, just last month. On those inspections, we're reviewing records that they have on site. We're looking at the waste, the types of waste that were received, the volume of waste that was received. We're looking at their facility self-inspections. David and his team perform weekly inspections of the facility, and they have a checklist that they go through to evaluate certain things. We look to make sure that they're documenting those facility self-inspections and are performing those. We look at their leachate collection system and their leachate collection records. At Skinquarter, they have a system in place where essentially the water that infiltrates the landfill is collected via piping system, and then it's directed to a large tank that's on site. And then they have tanker trucks that come in and pump and haul that leachate. The term's leachate for the liquid that's generated. And they haul that material off site in these tanker trucks, and it goes to the Proctors Creek wastewater treatment plant for treatment and disposal. They also perform gas monitoring at the facility, which they're really looking for the presence of methane. They have probes that are located on the perimeter of the facility where they do quarterly monitoring to determine whether there's presence of methane in those probes. We also look at their unauthorized waste program. They're required to evaluate a certain amount of the loads that are coming in state and then also out of state to determine that they're receiving what they're permitted to receive, to make sure that there's no MSW, municipal solid waste, or other unauthorized waste that might be coming in. So we look at those records to make sure that they're documenting the loads and performing those inspections accordingly. One of the things that we've received here in the last few months are reports of MSW being taken to the landfill. Some of the trucks that come in to the facility have MSW written on them or painted on them, and that's associated with, my understanding is that's associated with locality requirements that those trucks are also taking waste in different places require that MSW when they're shipping MSW. We've evaluated this on several occasions at the landfill. I was out there one day when a truck with MSW came on site and dumped, and there wasn't any MSW associated with that load. So I just wanted to let folks know that we've looked at that on several occasions, and we have no evidence to support that there's MSW going to the landfill. In fact, on some occasions, we've seen where they've documented that they have received MSW and they've rejected those loads and taken them to a landfill that's permitted for MSW, like Shoesmith, for example. Another thing we look at is landfill operations. So when we do our inspections, we walk around the facility, we look at the working face where they're dumping waste. We're making sure that they're covering their soil on a week, or covering their waste on a weekly basis. We're looking for tracking of mud, say out on Route 360. We want to make sure that there's no mud being tracked out onto the highway. And then also litter and dust control, making sure that litter is being controlled and it's not blowing off the facility, and that they have some sort of system to pick up litter that might be getting off of the the main working area. And then also, which I think a lot of us are here tonight to discuss, is odors. We also evaluate the presence of on-site and off-site odors. Our inspector will walk around the facility to see if he's can smell any evidence of odors, and then also we'll do some off-site odor surveys where we drive around different areas adjacent to the landfill to see if we smell odors as well. And since I guess about the spring or so, we have been receiving odor complaints from the public. Sometime, I guess it was at the end of the summer, the facility voluntarily decided to put together an odor neutralizing system and install that, at the facility. That began operation and sometime in the fall, and then, excuse me, and then fast forward to February, we performed an inspection, and then at the same time, we were getting some additional odor complaints at that time. So that led us to schedule a meeting to meet with David and his consultant out of the landfill. We did that last week, and based on the inspection and just discussions we had on site, we decided to move forward with requiring what's called an odor management plan for the facility. So the inspection report that we just issued last week on Friday, it requires the facility to put together an odor management plan to kind of formalize their plans for addressing odors moving forward. Some of the things we'd like to see in that would be some sort of process for documenting and investigating the complaints, and then also discussion of remedial measures that are going to be implemented to address the odor issues. And that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the presentation. So we'll open it up for questions. I will say that we have a couple that came in online. I'll use one of those first. I think we've already answered this, but I think it's, if it's only demolition debris, why the odor? I think we've answered it, but if you want to.
I'll just reiterate what was said before. The rotten egg odor is a result of the hydrogen sulfide, which is a process that happens when the wallboard breaks down.
So anybody from the community here that would like to ask a question? If so, David, can we get someone to bring them the mic? Or they can come up, either way.
I have a few. So back in 2018 in October, I was part of a citizen group that was particularly concerned about the fact that there was no odor management system going into this plan. And we were told that if operating properly, there would be no odor. Over and over again, we were told there will be no odor. When we brought up sheetrock getting wet, we were told that's not going to happen. And here are some questions we asked and some answers we got. And I want to know, is this what you all are doing over there? So, 1, what is Skinquarter Land LLC doing to prevent rainwater from seeping into the cells? You're welcome to answer, and then I can tell you what you provided us with back in 2018.
Well, let's give him an opportunity to answer.
So,
Yeah, I'm sorry, is the question, what are we doing to prevent rainwater from entering
from
the
seeping
cells?
into the cells, getting the sheetrock wet.
So we apply weekly cover, which would help prevent that. We do stabilize our slopes, which would provide the proper stormwater runoff that would redirect any of the rain that hits the surface areas into the stormwater management system.
Okay, so you said that you would be covering the material with dirt. It would be spread and compacted over the fill area on a weekly basis, and the size of the working face will only be as large as needed for efficient operation. In addition, once a cell is closed, it's covered by a synthetic 60 milliliter high density HDPE liner, and then covered by dirt vegetation layer. Are you doing those things on a daily basis?
We haven't closed a cell as of yet, and we are following the weekly cover requirements.
Okay, next, what exact liner are you using? Single, double, composite liner?
I'm sorry, to close the cell?
I mean, are you supposed to be, we were told that it wasn't just going to be, when you closed a cell, but intermittently you would be doing this to prevent groundwater, rainwater from seeping into the cells. So you're telling me you haven't used any yet?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again? Or you?
It said, what liner are you using? Are you using single liners, double liners, composite liners? Or are you saying that you just haven't used these liners to cover them yet?
There's just some clarification. There's, when you speak of a liner, that is usually at the bottom of the cell, not closing the cell. So when we open the cell, we do use whatever the regulatory requirement is for the millimeters for that liner system that goes in the bottom of the cell. And that is used to capture the rainwater, in which would hit the waste and become leachate, to stay in a controlled environment, to get pumped into a tank, to get pumped into a truck, and get delivered to a wastewater treatment plant.
So what are you using? Do you know which liner you're using?
I'd have to go back and look at the specifications.
Let's see. What kind of internal plumbing are you using to release the gas collection?
Internal plumbing. What do you mean by internal plumbing? I'm sorry.
When we asked the question in 2018, we were told 7 passive gas vent wells constructed of Schedule 80 PVC pipe that's utilized to vent the landfill gas.
Whatever the regulations require, we do have a quality construction assurance plan that assured that we built the landfill according to the regulation standards. So to speak exactly what those parameters are for the specific piping, I wouldn't be able to answer that without going back and looking at some of the construction documents. But the gas capture, the gas system to capture the methane, as Sean said earlier in his presentation, we do have those systems set up at the perimeter of the landfill that are built to the regulation standard.
Okay, since only 5% of the trucks are being inspected, what are you doing preventatively in case hazardous materials not permitted end up in the landfill?
So we inspect 10% of out-of-state vehicles, and we inspect 5% of in-state vehicles. We also inspect every load that is dumped. We document the 10 and 5% with inspection documentation that we keep on site.
And you provide all of that to DEQ?
Of course.
And could the community see that?
Of course.
Because we requested it in the past and haven't. How many groundwater wells are surrounding the landfill, and how often are they tested?
I believe there are 7 groundwater wells, and they're tested on a regular basis. Our engineer could answer that. 2 times a year.
And again, can we get documentation of that?
Absolutely. It's provided in our DEQ reports also.
This is a question for the county. We asked the county, how will you help monitor the landfill, separate from the DEQ? And it said the county's planning department will inspect the CDD landfill twice per year for compliance with the 16 conditions imposed by zoning. The county will also immediately investigate all complaints and violations. Has the county been doing that? And if so, when was the last time they did that?
Jesse or Clay, you want to answer that?
So, sorry. That's probably a better look for me anyway, Tommy. So anytime we get a complaint that comes into the county, we do send out inspectors. Lately, they've been out there probably once a week at least, if not multiple times. So anytime we get a complaint, there is an inspection performed. In terms of the reference to twice a year, I'll have to go back and see that. Again, I was not in this particular position when this was approved, so we'll go back and verify that for you. But we do routinely send inspections and code compliance out there. What type of report goes with this inspection? So our folks are really just looking for compliance with zoning conditions. So typically when they show up, it's unannounced. They will get a drive around with the folks there. They'll inspect the working phase. They will look for any indications of scavenger birds. Those sorts of things would indicate there's something being accepted other than CDD waste. So it's a lot of visual inspection. They typically will stay there for a while, watch the truck, see what's being dumped, but again, verifying the working phase itself. Sure, yeah. So typically the inspectors will document that with an email to their supervisor saying, hey, I went out on this time and this date, here's what I saw. I have those as well when I typically ask for them. So yeah, we do have verification of those. But there are quite a few times when they do go out there as a result of complaints. So you have seen these reports? Yeah, yes. Uh-huh. What violations have they found? So our group has not found any indication that there's been, for example, a violation of something other than CDD material being dumped there. Again, we're from a county perspective, we're just checking the conditions of zoning. That's separate from what Sean's group and DEQ are looking at.
Folks, if I could jump in here, my name's Dave Good. I work with Constituent Services with Chesterfield. We do get a little bit better sound quality for the folks who are viewing at home. If you're willing to come up to the stationary mic, I am, of course, willing to walk the mobile mic around the room. So.
Thank you, David. Real quick, we'll take one more from the online. I think we've talked about this too, which is what safeguards are in place at the landfill to ensure appropriate waste is being dumped. I think they've talked about that. I think another question was, are there plans to share the ongoing results of the testing with the public? And I think that information is shared with DEQ and that's available. Is that right?
Say that last part one more time, Kevin.
So are there plans to share ongoing testing of the results of the testing with the public? So when you do your inspections, that's some of the things that you look at, right? Testing? Type
Yes.
of testing that they do?
During our inspections, we look at their gas monitoring testing that they're doing, and that's really just evaluating to determine whether there's methane that's migrating off-site, and there's been no evidence of that. In terms of groundwater data, that kind of comes in via a different avenue. We receive semi-annual reports from the facility, and we have groundwater specialists who evaluate that data. Our inspectors aren't really looking at the groundwater data necessarily. They're looking at the groundwater wells to make sure that the condition is, they're in good shape, that any type of concrete structure around the well to protect it and to seal up the well is looks good, and also they're making sure that the wells are locked and labeled during our compliance inspections. But in terms of evaluating that data, we have geologists who look at that data that's coming in on a regular basis.
And that is kept, right? Stored?
Yes, sir.
And that could be shared with the community if someone was to ask for it?
Absolutely.
I think that answers the question as far as that one goes. Another question, is the general public allowed to dump demolition debris, or is it available to licensed contractors only?
The general public is permitted to use our facility.
Thank you. Another question from,
So I understand that you have well testing and et cetera. And the document I've seen said it would be 10 wells on the site, on the property. You said, someone said 7, every 6 months. We all live off of wells out here. So my question is, why are we doing it so infrequently? And what have been the results of your well testing to date? And what have been the results of your surface water coming off and running off that's not being captured within the collection system? Have you gone beyond the boundaries to make sure that that water, what's coming off there, isn't contaminating the surrounding areas?
I'll try and answer that. In terms of the second part, I'm not aware of any monitoring that's been done, say, surface water monitoring, like in an adjacent stream. In terms of the groundwater data that's coming in, they're performing semi-annual testing, and right now, I looked at the report before coming this evening for 2021. They haven't had any hits of concentrations above that are statistically significant in terms of background. So when a landfill is constructed and they install a monitoring well network, they also test background concentrations of the same constituents to make sure they kind of understand what the zinc concentrations are normally, before operation of the landfill. And then once they start performing their monitoring, they're comparing that data to the background concentrations, and there hasn't been any statistical significantly increase as a result of the groundwater testing they've done since they've operated. If they were to have a hit and indicate that additional testing would be needed, then we would move through that process to require more testing in the future, and perhaps for additional constituents as well. But right now, the testing that they're required to do is outlined in the regulations, and then depending on how things progress over time, if there was a hit of something that was above the statistically significant difference, then they might be at a point where they would have to monitor more often and possibly have additional parameters to test for as well.
So has the county or has DEQ considered more than every 6 months? Because if something goes bad, it could go bad quick. We're on top of an aquifer out here, at least in that area, and it's a very important part of our water supply. So if something goes wrong, how do you catch it before it's gone wrong too far? And what are the specifics that you're looking for? Is it arsenic? Is it heavy metals? Like because there's a lot of stuff coming out of a CDD landfill. That's metals and whatnot and equipment. So basically anything can go in there coming from a construction site. So what are you looking for that if it goes bad, our water isn't going to be completely annihilated before you can go back and do more frequent testing?
The regulations, the Virginia Solid Waste Management regulations, which I mentioned earlier, they have specific constituents that are required to be tested for at landfills, and it's a combination of metals. I'd have to go and look and see which metals are in there. Maybe arsenic's one of them, I'm not sure. And then also volatile organic compounds like VOCs. Those are also tested for. And then there's 2 lists in the regs. There's I think it's table 3.1, and there's an A and a B. And right now, I believe they're testing for the constituents in the A list. David, I don't know if you can elaborate on what parameters are being tested or not, but.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Butch Joyce, who is with Labella Engineering, and he provides all of our testing processes and data.
Yeah, so Sean is right. The sampling parameters that are being tested for now are the 3.1, table 3.1, column A, which includes some metals, and I can't tell you exactly what they are. They're in the regulations. And as David said, or Sean said, volatile organic compounds. So those are the inorganics, the metals, and the organics being the VOCs, which are being tested for. And they are tested on a semi-annual basis. And if I may just elaborate a little bit about your question about why not more frequent than semi-annual. Well, of course, the semi-annual, 2 times a year, is per the solid waste regulations, the Virginia regulations. And when any landfill in Virginia is permitted, there is an extensive investigation of the subsurface conditions below the ground. We want to understand the groundwater and the geology and the soils on that site. And one of the things that we have to understand, and we report it to the DEQ, is the direction of the groundwater flow and the rate at which it moves, the groundwater, okay? So it's the velocity of the groundwater moving under the ground at that site and the direction it's flowing in, okay? And the other thing we look at when we investigate a site is what would be the potential receptors. Could be wells, could be surface water, discharge points, and those types of things. So based on that, we pull all of that information together. Our geologists and engineers submit that to the DEQ's geologists and engineers. They review it, and again, they didn't see any reason for us to do any more sampling than semi-annually based on the site characteristics of the facility. So that's why we use a twice-a-year sampling. Okay?
So the question still remains, though, what about the surface water and where that water is going and with the direction? So can you guys address that? I'll let it be with that. Oh, can you please address then surface water runoff? Big picture, y'all, we had a landfill effort by the previous owner try to put in fly ash and whatnot, and we know that the contaminant potential from those kind of products could have leached out and damaged our water table, and that was a concern. But also the surface water. So I'm curious what's coming off that thing, what's heading towards people's homes that are south and west of that property. Have we assessed it? And if we haven't, why are we not doing it?
Okay, and the answer to your question is yes. The site is required. It's called a VPDES stormwater permit. The site is required. That's a permit. It's issued by the DEQ. There are, and I'm just looking at my notes, there are quarterly inspections. There are, of these discharges, there are 5 sampling locations around the site, and they're sampled on a quarterly basis, on a semi-annual basis, these 5 sampling sites. And what are they sampling for? Suspended solids, semi-volatile organic compounds, ammonia, biological oxygen demand, or BOD, nitrogen, and phosphorus are the parameters that are being sampled at these 5 locations around the site. So the site, again, as part of the permitting process, is required to demonstrate to DEQ that all of the stormwater that runs off of the site is controlled and managed, and before it's discharged into either an on-site or off-site stream, that these 5 sampling locations, they're discharged through these sampling locations. And that's why we monitor those on a semi-annual basis for these parameters. So it's, again, it's a very controlled monitoring system that was designed specifically for that site, for the shape of that site, And that was, again, as Sean has said, reviewed by the DEQ's engineers and geologists and approved for the operations. And then David's responsibility and his staff is to carry out those sampling and requirements in the permit.
Who's getting the samples? People at the property?
No. They contract with our company to independently do the sampling, and the people that do the sampling are trained environmental scientists, and people are qualified to do this type of sampling. The samples are then follow a protocol that's established by EPA and the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality and sent to a qualified laboratory, and those laboratory results come back, they're reviewed, and then, as Sean said earlier, those results are sent on a semi-annual basis to the DEQ, and those records are available to the public. Okay?
And just to add one thing to that, so the industrial stormwater general permit, which I mentioned earlier, the VAR 05 number, that's the permit that regulates the industrial stormwater runoff. So they have stormwater ponds on site that are tested periodically, like Butch mentioned, and then that data is submitted to DEQ, separate program from the program I work in, but yes, that data is submitted as well to DEQ on a periodic basis.
I think I have a couple more questions from online. And this is, I think, a question for DEQ. Besides the scheduled inspections, how many unscheduled or surprise inspections have been conducted in the last 12 months?
I think I'm going to have to defer to our solid waste inspector, Doug Massini. Could you help answer that question, Doug, in terms of how many inspections we've done out there separate from what's been scheduled? I know we've been out there a handful of times besides our scheduled inspections.
Pete, we get a lot better sound quality for the viewers at home. We have approximately the same number of people participating at home as are in the audience tonight. So if people with questions or those answering questions could approach the center mic, that would be advantageous. Thank you.
Typically, we hold to what has been typically what EPA would ask us to do, with somewhere between 75–85% of announced inspections and the balance being unannounced inspections. As far as how many surprise inspections, I've only been inspecting the facility since December of 2020, and probably I would say the majority of the first 3 quarterly inspections were unannounced. And then since then, when there are particular complaints that came in regarding particular odors, we would be out there surveying the areas. And probably I've been on site maybe 2 or 3 times within the last year when it was not a quarterly inspection, but just to do a site inspection when odors were detected. So altogether, between the 3 unscheduled and then even the scheduled, we would just pop in just to do our quarterly inspections probably about 3 or 4 times.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
A follow-up question to that I have my own is, how many inspectors do you have for you said 30 counties?
Yes, sir.
How many inspectors do you have for the 30 counties on staff?
In our office, the Piedmont Regional Office, we have 2 solid waste inspectors. So Doug Massini, and then we have another inspector.
And how many landfill facilities are in those 30 counties that you're responsible to do inspections on?
In terms of landfills, we have, I can't specify the number of landfills, but we have approximately 80 solid waste management facilities. So that's active landfills, closed landfills, which is a landfill that's not operating anymore. And then also permit by rules, so like transfer stations that receive waste and then take it from the transfer station onto a landfill, they also have a solid waste permit with us. It's called a PBR, permit by rule, but there's approximately 80 of those facilities total in terms of active landfills, closed landfills, and PBRs.
So 2 people to keep track of all that in 30 counties.
At the moment, yes, sir.
Okay. I have some other questions here from the community, but I want to give other people the opportunity to come up and ask questions that they may have.
I have quite a few questions, so if you could just bear with me. Mainly focusing, obviously, on the odor. Every time I hear talk about the gas management and that sort of thing, you refer to methane. Yet, we have been told and insistently told that this is H2s gases. Why are you guys not measuring H2s gases before now? And are you even now?
I guess I'll start with that just to kind of explain the difference in terms of why I was mentioned methane. So they're required to have a gas management plan. All landfills, generally all landfills are. So in this case, they have monitoring probes that are installed on the perimeter boundary of the facility. And what they're required to test for is methane. We're looking to ensure that there isn't an exceedance of methane above the lower explosive limit, which is 5% of 5% methane. So they're testing for the presence of methane to determine whether they're above that threshold, essentially. So that's that part of it, which is separate from the H2s monitoring you're referring to. I understand that the facility has voluntarily done some H2s monitoring on-site and then off-site at different times. David will be able to speak to that more clearly than myself.
Yes, thank you. So we do have some constant ambient air testing for hydrogen sulfide on site. We've also conducted 2 specific odor surveys in which we took those instruments and we tested off-site to detect for the presence of H2S.
Where off-site are you testing?
I do have the odor plan. There was a few different locations. I called the Skinquarter Baptist Church as one of them. I could provide you all of those locations. There was about 7 of them, but we started across the street near the Skinquarter Market. We moved down to the Get and Go. We went down to the Skinquarter Baptist Church. We went west towards the post office. But those exact locations I'd have to get, we have it plotted on a map.
So you pretty much left your complex and then went across the street, started there, and then went out other ways?
And yes, we did.
Okay.
And we did
Hold on a
it.
second. David, can you pull the mic down for her? I want to make sure everybody at home can hear what you're asking. Oh, you're like a rock and roll star.
So you went across the street, out of your facility, across the street, and then you went over down Skinquarter in that area?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Well, I personally have sent you many, many emails that I get very little feedback on, and I am located past there. And oftentimes, if you can smell it, it's maybe beginning at the Skinquarter Market, but very often not. It doesn't begin until you get to the berry farm. So then the berry farm is an issue, but then all the way up to the post office. And I have made that clear. So if you're not testing that area, then you're not testing areas that you're going to smell it.
Right. I did say that we did go west to the post office also
Okay,
for that test. Yes.
okay. Because I live even further past there, and this is a really big problem that smothers my property. Is there anything going on in the middle of the night at this landfill ever?
By going on in the middle, you mean operations going on in the middle of the night? There's no operations.
Any kind of burning of anything? because it has been made, community records have shown a trend of quite a heavy smell happening between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. So I'm just wondering if there's any kind of explanation to that.
So we have run a filtration system predominantly during those periods between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m.
You run a filtration system.
Yes.
So why is that making it worse?
I don't know, I
mean,
don't
I
know if
live
that's
right apart.
exactly what you're referring to, that the odor from that is making it worse, but what we do is we have to constantly change the media to make sure that that filtration system, the media can keep up with the filtration system.
Okay, regarding that filtration system, being that it was not installed from go, you guys have just done that in October, correct?
We started in September, actually.
But it wasn't installed and functioning until October, correct?
Probably, it took some time to get all the components together, but
Okay.
I would say that.
Because the deadline we were given is October
I
1st,
would
and
say
it
that
wasn't
would-
done by then, so I was just making sure. But in moving forward from that, though, I'm pretty sure that it was Mr. Golden that I had a conversation with that stated, for the first time of my awareness, that it is an undersized test system for your facility. Is that the case?
It was a smaller testing unit that we were operating at first. We have since installed a larger unit,
When did that happen?
probably about mid-November.
Okay, because this conversation was just like 2 weeks ago, so I wasn't aware of that larger system that had been put in, and I guess, I'm not sure if James was either. And some changes that had been made that you were made aware of come February 7th, the last inspection. What changes were made to this system as of February 7th, and were they approved by anybody to say that it's going to be helpful?
So we started with gas scrubbing and gas filtration systems, which for the start of the conversation with gas management, it's not one size fits all. It's the concentration levels and it's the regeneration level that the landfill is going to have to regenerate the gas, right? Those are all important components to make sure you get the right system in there. So there is some testing that is required and some changes that would have to be made as we learned how that was operating or generating, the gas was generating. So through the process, we have made some changes. However, the technology is pretty much similar. One uses a wet media and the other uses a dry media.
Okay, so who's overseeing these changes to make sure that they're effective, other than the community that's complaining about it?
Myself and the companies that provide the units and our engineers.
So are you like riding around on a daily basis outside of the area? Because it's already been noted that it's not a problem on-site, it's a problem off-site. So if you're the one that's making sure, are you doing daily ride-arounds?
We do
at different times of the day, every day?
Absolutely. We do it at 6 o'clock when we open up the facility. We check the monitors to see to see if there's any presence of hydrogen sulfide. We do want to make sure our employees are safe when they're working, for sure. And we also have, just through the daily working environment, we go by and we check those areas to make sure that all the components are there and they're operational.
But that's on-site, right?
That is on site, yes.
Okay, we've already discovered that it's not a problem on-site,
Yes.
according to yourself. What monitoring are you doing off-site on a daily basis that tells you that your changes are working?
So we don't do any monitoring offsite on a daily basis. We have done that in 2 specific gas investigation studies.
Okay. What are safe levels of H2s gases, indoors and out?
I'll defer to Mr. Joyce, who.
The OSHA permissible exposure limits, you probably looked this up, it's 20 parts per million, all right? And I'd be glad to send you this table, and it tells you what the concentrations of hydrogen sulfide are and how they affect a person, an individual. So the limit is 20 parts per million. and that is for 10 minutes of exposure of that level, that concentration of gas. Okay?
Sure, okay.
Being that it's 20 parts per million for 10 minutes, on-site, we've established that it's not a problem. Off-site, it is a problem. So for those of us that are at our homes and have this horrid smell and are forced to go into our home, or like me 2 weeks ago, I was ready to get a hotel room because I couldn't stay in my house. At what levels can it become dangerous? Not what are your max, and at what point am I going to pass out? What point is it going to cause me headaches, stomach aches, nauseous, all of that sort of thing?
Okay. And this is I'm just reading from a table, so everybody will know, from Niosh and Osha standards. But basically, I'll read a couple of concentrations and what the exposure may cause, if that answers your question. So, parts per million, 2 to 5 parts per million. Prolonged exposure may cause nausea, tearing of the eyes, headaches, or loss of sleep, airway problems, and some asthma patients. 20 parts per million, possible fatigue, loss of appetite, headache, irritability, poor memory, dizziness. 50 to 100 parts per million, could be some eye irritations, respiratory tract irritations, may cause digestive upset and loss of appetite. So these are just standard symptoms and effects from these different concentrations of gas. So, and some of the result, or the testing that David referred to earlier that was done, I think it was last fall and last summer, around the site, off the site, there were no concentrations detected at any of these levels, off-site sampling that was done. Okay?
As far as DEQ goes, are you going to set up some kind of testing around the area, not on-site, but off-site?
In terms of DEQ actually collecting air monitoring data? We don't have any plans to do that at this time. I think at this point, we would evaluate what the facility decides to do in terms of developing their odor management plan, which might include on-site and off-site monitoring. And we would look at, we would ask to see the data that they're collecting before we would make any decisions related to possibly doing our own monitoring.
Is there not enough complaints about how bad this is for you to justify having an air permit for them, for you to justify your own testing? How is the public supposed to feel about that, as far as, do we trust the levels that they're giving us, and why is it not an independent person testing that, and why aren't you doing that?
Well, if I could add to that real quick, I think it's important for people to understand what's involved with our odor management plan, what type of things can be required in an odor management plan, such as some of the things she's asking about. If you could kind of elaborate a little bit to the community about what goes into an odor management plan for a facility.
Okay. Yeah, I think in terms of what we would like to see in an odor management plan, it's a combination of putting pen to paper with some of the stuff that's already occurred in terms of documenting the complaints and investigating the complaints, and a lot of that work's already taken place right now. Where I think the focus of an odor management plan and the benefit it could have to the community is establishing remedial actions to address the odors. So what can they do at the facility to prevent off-site odors or potentially prevent off-site odors from occurring? And then also, what kind of monitoring are they going to be doing, like the H2s testing? I think it would be beneficial if there was, some sort of H2s monitoring as part of that odor management plan. And that would be data that we would evaluate during our inspections. And then it doesn't have to be during our inspections either. We could ask to see that data, as if we're getting, complaints. And it's up to the facility to kind of put together some technologies and a plan to implement technologies to address the odors. Once they develop an odor management plan, they'll submit that to DEQ, and we'll look at it, review it, and then that plan will become part of their operating record. And as we continue to do inspections moving forward, we will evaluate that plan and then conditions on site. If we're still getting, odor complaints, we'll look at what their plan says they're going to do to ensure that they're doing what's outlined in their plan. And then, as needed, if additional steps are needed longer term, we'll work with the facility to have them make adjustments to that plan. It's a working document. It's not something that just gets developed and then is supposed to just sit on in a file cabinet. It's supposed to be something that's looked at on a routine basis to evaluate and update as needed.
Is there any way for the public to know what that plan consists of?
Yes. Once it's submitted to DEQ, so our inspection report for our February 7th inspection just went out last Thursday. Usually there's anywhere from a couple weeks to maybe 6 weeks lag in terms of when we do an inspection, when our inspection report actually gets sent to the facility. So we sent Mr. Valdez the inspection report on Thursday. It outlines the requirement for them to put together an odor management plan. The regulations provide 90 days in terms of a time frame that a plan is supposed to be submitted to DEQ, so that would be 90 days from last Thursday. And, they can certainly submit it sooner, but the regs allow them 90 days to put that plan together. Once we receive it, it's public information, it's FOIAble, is all somebody would have to do is submit a FOIA, and then that information is public information.
And if I could add to that, so once we started receiving some of the complaints, we voluntarily did most of the components that would be the basis to begin to build the odor management plan. So we're looking at instituting, so we did all the evaluation for the gas and what type of odors, what type of media, what type of remediation was out there. So we've already done a lot of that legwork that we're going to institute into our odor management plan to speed that process up.
So you're saying, though, that you're already doing what is going to be in your odor management plan? Is that, am I understanding right?
As Sean said, it's a working document because it's actually a working environment also. So we did all the testing and we've tried the different media and different remediations that we would do as if it was part of an odor management plan.
Okay, so what we would expect result-wise from this odor management plan with DEQ is what's already happening? Because it's not working at all.
So we have been operating the filtration system pretty regularly on the site. We've noticed a difference on the site. We've had some positive results on the site that we've seen the filtration system has given us those results. We've explored different medias, and we're going to a more composite, less absorbent media that we're hoping to have a longer effectiveness than the biomedia that we're using prior. So that media was just delivered this past week, and we're looking to have that installed within the next 2 weeks or so.
Okay. I have more questions, but I want to give everybody else an opportunity too. So if anybody else wants, and then I'll come back.
Sure.
There are a lot of points of view from which I'd like to speak, but I'll try to limit. Some of what we're hearing tonight is about what is happening and what's being done with regards to compliance. Compliance to DEQ, compliance to what was in the permit, compliance to standards for hydrogen sulfur dioxide. Methane is something that we're not terribly concerned about, although that's in something that was in your specifications for operating the plant, but we don't seem to have an issue with methane. But the things we have an issue with apparently were not something that your design was originally going to address. So that we have a mismatch here. You seem to have had operating design for operating to certain compliance requirements that doesn't actually address what the community and what the neighborhood is experiencing in terms of problems. And I hear a current of discount to what the community is experiencing. And that's bothersome, because we live here. You don't. You come to work, you go home. We live here. So we live with the results of whatever your facility was not designed to address. Maybe the construction debris was only supposed to have up to 5% of drywall. Maybe that's not very much. But if we have this much of a problem in this community with that small amount of debris, supposedly, technically, according to your audits or your compliance inspections, that small amount of debris, we have a lot of problem for a small amount of debris that you're supposed to being allowed there. And your inspections are inspecting what, maybe 5% of what comes into your facility, according to what I read. So if you're doing inspections maybe once every 2 months, your sampling rate is small, and you're only supposedly getting a small amount of construction debris that would necessarily cause this cast-off of odor. How do you explain this? This does not make sense. If you try to put mathematical formulas to this, this does not make logical sense. There's something else afoot. There's something else that's a problem. So we haven't even talked about how is it reasonable that this is happening? That's number one. Number two, we have a problem with hydrogen sulfide. And you have monitoring that you're putting up around in your facility perimeter and the 5 locations which you've already documented that you are starting to take a look at on a certain periodic basis. But these are not necessarily the only locations that the community is having a problem. One of the people who I'm sitting next to said, is anybody taking into account altitude? You know, different gases appear in different places. Now, if your monitoring stations are at a different altitude than where the gas is appearing, then you're not going to pick it up. Those of us who live further out west in Chesterfield County are probably at a lower altitude, slightly lower, but if the gas is migrating at night and sinking, we're going to get it, and we do get it. I agree with one of my neighbors. If you go outside after 9 o'clock at night, you better wear a mask, a gas mask. Or in the middle of the night, if you have to get up and let one of the dogs out to go to the bathroom, wear a gas mask, because it is horrible. So I invite you to come out there, not just at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or at 8 o'clock in the morning when the sun's coming up and the humidity conditions or the air conditions are different or the wind conditions are different. I invite you to come out there when residents are at home. Many of us are willing to put these gas monitoring stations in our own yards. I'll even pay for it. You don't even have to pay for it. I don't even care if the government pays for it. What I would like you to do is collect valid data. I don't understand this question about well, you're collecting a certain amount of data on your own perimeter. What about the rest of the county? What about the rest of the neighborhoods? If you're going to actually try to address what is the scope of the problem, how can you not do that without enough data being collected that you know what the scope of the problem is? So the origin of the problem still seems to me doesn't make sense, and the scope of the problem is still not being properly documented. I don't understand how a department with the amount of responsibility that you have across 30 counties with 2 inspectors could possibly handle this workload, especially not only when you're doing normal compliance testing, but when you've got actually a real community serious issue, and you've got that extra labor requirement, and God bless them, I don't know how they do what they do. So I think, number one, you need more community input, not to make your lives miserable, but to solve the problem. If there were no problem, we wouldn't be here.
Can I interject real quick? I'm sorry, ma'am. Do you mind, what is your name?
My name is Carroll Cornwell, and I'm an ISO 9000 Quality Systems Auditor. I just retired after 30 years of service. And I did not want to do this anymore, but what frustrates me is when I see a mismatch of intention, which I do believe people have good intentions, but when you have a scope of a problem that is beyond what the original design was, then you need to sit down and really try to sit down and tear the thing apart and figure out what is the origin of it. Now, I know there's some good faith efforts being put through here. I do understand that. But in order to really document with data that really helps to lead to an effective remediation, you really have to get a handle on the scope of the problem with proper data. And without that, to really know the scope of the problem, you are never going to have a satisfactory remediation.
Thank you for your input. I'd like to address a few of the points that you brought up. I don't know if I could remember them all, though, but in terms of, your offer for a gas testing device in your yard, we'd be more than glad to oblige that and make sure
And
that...
I'm sure it's not just me. I'm sure there are many of us who would be happy to try to help, because all of us would love to see this go away.
That is absolutely some of the data that we definitely want to have on hand and collect. The odor we understand the seriousness of the odor. So although we may not have been as communicative as we should have been, and I could take some of that, apologies to DEQ for not keeping them abreast of some of the things that we were doing on site as this gas filtration and scrubber system was evolving. But we are testing at the site, at the source of what people are saying at the source, which we feel to be the center of where the issues are, which would allow us to then to have the proper data to move and test off-site to make sure that it isn't migrating. And I can't speak scientifically as to the altitude, the density of the gas, and where it would lie or how it could lie. I'm sure that we would invest in those types of studies once we know everything that's going on site, and by testing the perimeter, knowing if the gas is leaving the site. So that is going to be part of our process moving forward.
Thank you. And as you look back, I'm sure you'll take a look at these comments, many of these comments, when they're in written form. But please take a look. Many of us are willing to help. Nobody likes to constantly be a source of complaints. Everybody wants to be a source of a solution. We all do.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I think that gentleman was just before you. Sir, you have a question?
Hello. Apologies for those of you that are smarter than me. I just want to apologize for my high school chemistry. I want to address the hydrogen sulfide thing, and also a couple of things that Mr. Valdez just mentioned. So hydrogen sulfide, so this is as much for the residents in the audience as it is for everybody else, but it's not an odor problem, it's a gas problem. It's a dangerous gas problem. So we look at methane and we think methane is this dangerous thing because it's explosive, it's flammable. So is hydrogen sulfide. Okay. Hydrogen sulfide has a specific gravity of 1.2. That means it's heavier than air. Okay. Because it's heavier than air, walking around the outside of the property is unlikely to measure suitable quantities of it. What you need to do is you need to go and find low-lying areas. For those of you that are probably experiencing more of it, you probably live in low-lying areas, okay? That's the first thing. So what happens is when it leaves the site, it collects in all the low-lying areas, especially sewers, drains, depressions in geography, places like that. Okay, that's the first thing to remember. So it's heavier than air, so it travels along the ground, okay? It's very well known for building up in low-lying areas, poorly vented areas, things like that. The problem is that after a while, at low or even more quickly at high concentrations, you can't smell it anymore. You start to lose the sense of smell for hydrogen sulfide, okay? So people that are continually exposed to it don't know it's there anymore. So the smell will come, and then they won't be able to smell it for a while after. And again, I apologize if I'm less than accurate here, high school chemistry. Okay? The problem is that even at low concentrations, even at prolonged exposure at 10 parts per million, which we've already heard isn't that much, okay, it can lead to acute respiratory failure if you're continually exposed to it. So even though we've got all of this stuff going on about methane and we're very worried about methane, hydrogen sulfide is no less dangerous, is no less deadly. And I'm really concerned that there hasn't been more thought going into where we're going to test, and if it has, I apologize again. But you need to find the low-lying areas where it might gather and test there, not just randomly test around the neighborhood and stuff like that, okay? So it's really important to know more about hydrogen sulfide and what the site is doing to mitigate that, because it's not just going to be around the outskirts of the property. It doesn't work like that. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
We're all here because of the odor. And I have a commercial tire business. I've been around landfills a lot with my service trucks and that sort of thing. I do business with 3 or 4 landfills now that are C&D landfills. I never smell an odor there. I don't know what you're doing that's different than the other people, but the odor is there. I mean, and you can smell it at 3 and 4 miles away from your facility. So you need to find out what is causing it, and you need to correct it, because it's not right for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Mr. Carroll, I'd like to say that I appreciate you having this meeting based on the past with DEQ at the Shoesmith dump and some of the other dumps where the public would come to meetings and then nothing would go on. At least you're doing it at the beginning. It's to be appreciated. I appreciate, David, you're trying to do something about it, but for the county to be reactive is not the way to do it. You need to be a little bit proactive. Jesse, you need to stop blaming DEQ and start doing some more with your job. Chesterfield County is a $1 billion business. I think we have something in our budget where we can have our people looking at this landfill on times where DEQ is not looking at it. How about setting up a website where all the DEQ documents, where all the county documents, where all the complaints can be in one place? Because if you want somebody to start going into FOIs, that's a nightmare. get all this information, put it in a timely basis on a site, on the county site, where the people can access it. Then if you do something, David, they can proactively look at what you've done and say, hey, this is working. Or it's not working. Maybe you need to put those monitors because, yes, hydrogen sulfide is heavier than air and it's going to settle to the lowest spots. So let's be proactive about this rather than reactive. And the first step you did as being proactive is having this meeting at the beginning and not 10 years down the road like Shoesmith did.
If I could touch base on that. So interestingly enough, that's a conversation that I had today with Dr. Casey, the county administrator. And my wish going forward is that as the odor control plan is devised and spelled out, I want the county to look into entering into an MOU with DEQ to have the ability to have enforcement action. We have similar MOUs like this with other agencies throughout the state. It's something that we could look into, have a dedicated person with the proper training to be able to be exactly what you talked about, a person within the county where all this information can come through and we can see it in the bigger picture. And it wouldn't just be for this landfill, but the other landfills that we have in the community that need monitoring. I think this is something that's long overdue. I think it's something we can do. We need to get the right person in place, and that actually helps them in the sense that we have somebody who's coordinating the effort, so to speak, between our landfills, the county, and DEQ. I do like your suggestion about having a website somewhere within the county to facilitate all that, and that would probably fall under the whoever gets put in charge and then the staffing to do that. And again, I think it's important not just for this particular site, because I don't want you guys to feel like I'm picking on you alone, but we have other landfills. The one on Taylor Road, for example, sometimes get complaints. I know that the Shoesmith landfill has added a system to it to collect methane, which is hopefully cutting down on the air complaints in that area of the county. But nevertheless, it is something that we've had conversations about, and I'll be talking with other board members about and asking for proposals to be put forward through staff on how we can address exactly what you mentioned, putting something together to be proactive and not reactive. Does anybody else have any other questions? If not, I got a couple on the online portal that I'm going to address. Okay. Okay, I'll give you a chance to get up there. So, David, this is for you. The odor control system, actually, and this is probably kind of technical, but how does it work? And how is it measured? And, you know, is there a point where the community can learn the effectiveness of it? So that's the question.
Sure, and it is a filtration system that allows the hydrogen sulfide of the gas pulled out of the landfill to pass through this filtration system, and I think Mr. Butch could probably speak a little bit more elaborate to the science related to that, if he wouldn't mind.
So the way it works is in the bottom of the landfill, there's a piping system, and it's those pipes in the bottom of that landfill have gravel all around them. It's a porous location for the leachate to drain down and then be pumped off the landfill to protect the groundwater, which we talked about earlier, the liner system. These pipes are placed on top of this high-density polyethylene liner material. Those pipes come out the side of the landfill and up a slope, and they outlet out beyond the waste on the edge. And those are called cleanouts for those leachate collection pipes. It is at those cleanouts where David has placed a cap where a cap with a series of piping connecting these different cleanouts. I think it's 7 or 9 cleanouts there along the western edge of the landfill. And with the pipes connected, we've hooked up a blower. It's like a vacuum system, and we're pulling the gas out of that, off of those cleanouts through that vacuum, through that blower, and then that gas, as David has said earlier, is discharged into basically a large 40 cubic yard box, a metal box, which is filled with mulch, wood mulch, and the other treatment technology that he has used out there is, he called it an air stripper earlier, which is basically a tank with gas in it, with liquids in it, and then that gas is bubbled up through that stripper and then discharged into the mulch can, the mulch box there on site. Those are the systems that we have tried to date. They're not they are somewhat effective, but they're not as effective as obviously we want them to be. So as David has already said, we're looking at other technologies right now to employ out there to manage this odor, and these will be presented in that odor management plan that we'll submit to DEQ.
Thank you, sir.
We've been hearing all night about the odor plan. What is the goal? Elimination, reduction?
The goal would first to be reduction, of course, and as we fine tune it, the ultimate goal would be elimination. I'm not sure as, to the effectiveness of any gas management system, whether 100% elimination is even possible, but the goal would be reduction first, for sure.
Okay, and back to where you said you tested locally, what time of day did you test? What direction was the wind blowing?
I have those studies I could forward to you directly after the meeting. I don't know exactly all of the atmospheric pressure conditions that was happening during those testing events.
Because being right across the street from them and having a business there, depending on the wind blow, it depends on the smell. But it appears that with the dew coming at night, 9 o'clock, it hits ground. 6 o'clock in the morning, it hits ground. So you can just walk across the street, 6 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock at night. You don't need a monitor.
Thank you. We'll make sure that we include that at those times the next time we do the testing. Thank you. And I might add to everybody that's listening that the landfill is open to the public, and we invite anybody that wants to take a tour of the landfill if you want to witness the conditions for yourself.
One other question from the online portal. Let me pull the most recent ones up, make sure. So, David, do we have a sign-in sheet for everybody to sign in and get their contact information established tonight?
Carroll, in the back of the room is a sign-up sheet. A lot of folks signed in coming into the room. If those who didn't sign in would do so, we'll be happy to provide more information going forward as it becomes available.
And the people on Facebook, they can send information to the Board of Supervisors at chesterfield.gov, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I think it was said before, but the findings are verified from a third party that you hired to do the testing, is that right?
That is correct.
Someone's requested, can the county please post a map of low-lying areas within 10 miles? I know that, I think I can speak to this, where's Jesse at? In our GIS system that you can pull up online, I believe there's a topographical map of the county that does, in fact, show you what the low-lying systems. Now, the question, of course, is whether or not the viewer would understand what the topo map actually means, and, because some people have never experienced that before.
Yes, sir, you're correct. The county's GIS has 5-foot contours. If folks need help interpreting that, certainly county staff can help. I'm happy to do that after the meeting if people want to see that and kind of figure it out for their own.
And for those who wonder what that is, you can just type in a search for Chesterfield GIS, and that will pop up, and then there's a variety of maps that you can look that the county provides, including all the parcel maps as an example. So,
I just had a suggestion. We do have a community Facebook group about the landfill. It's called Citizens Corner Whole Street Landfill. There are about 900 residents who voice their concerns about it on there. And when we do notice the stench, we communicate that way. And then what we typically will do is send emails to the DEQ and others, alerting them of the stench, the time, the location. For example, I live in a different part. I'm about 3.5 miles away from it, but in a different area from those folks. We don't smell it as frequently, but when we do, we all smell it. So it's usually in the morning for us, from about 8 to 9 a.m., and I tell my kids to just hold their breaths and run into the car. And then just to make sure this couldn't be some other smell, I'll post onto the Facebook group, is anyone else smelling the landfill this morning? And what's troublesome is, in November, one of the dates, November 17th, I emailed Doug Massini and some others about the smell, and others did as well, including people on West County Line Road, which is 12.5 miles away. So we are concerned about the levels of these gases, because if it is as potent as it is, 3.5 miles away, 12.5 miles away, we are worried about human health. And I think for those of you in the county who are here today, in 2018, we asked for an odor management plan to be instituted from the beginning. And I think it's really important moving forward, because there are other projects that might need to be regulated by the DEQ, that these are put in place, because it doesn't matter if you have the best of intentions. If you read online, or we asked all these questions, there should not be an odor from CDD landfills, period, if operating properly. So we're hearing a lot about what do we do now that there is an odor, instead of what we should have done in 2018 to make sure there never was an odor, and that our children and all of us in this room weren't exposed to these gases for 4 years. So anyways, I would love if there was a website so that we don't have to do it through the Facebook group. Just create a website. When you smell it, you report it, the location, the time, and then someone from the county or something goes out immediately to those places and looks at the levels, so we can get some real readings and some real data on this, because it's a health issue.
Just to address some of that, so our internal conversations as we look at instituting the odor management plan, one of those would be an online reporting portal that would be available to the public. We've seen some instances where this was very helpful, and people could go online and be able to report an odor through a third-party website. So, thank you.
So I had a question regarding all the developments that are going on up in UMG East. There's the proposed 600 some odd residences. You have Magnolia Green, you have Westerly, you have everything north of Otterdale. We're all smelling it up there, so, like they said, but we keep stacking more homes up there. And like Victoria had mentioned, you guys, along with a lot of the planning processes going on relating to the UMGE, UMG West, there's a lot of best intentions without a whole lot of planning and foresight put in place beforehand. More just a comment.
Thank you.
I'm sure y'all are done hearing me, but I just wanted to add one little bit more. H2, we're here for an odor, yes. But the bottom line is, this is a gas. This is dangerous. Going back to what one of our neighbors said back here, this is dangerous. And when it wakes me up from a dead sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning inside my house, what am I supposed to do if I have a gas leak? I'm going to assume it's the landfill and my house just sinks and then I'm dead. I mean, what do we do if that happens? And that's a true question. How much longer, what is your time frame? How much longer do we have to suffer before the landfill suffers? Because as of right now, y'all aren't suffering. It's been over a year we've been suffering. It's been over a year that we've been reporting it. We've been suffering for much longer. So how much longer do we suffer before y'all suffer? No answer?
You know, to address that, we are working towards a solution for the odor, any odors that are generated on site. And of course, any discomfort.
Gases.
Right, any odors that are residual of the gases that are created on site. You know, the detectable levels of hydrogen sulfide in the odor that's detected, it's, I think, like 0.011 parts per million. It's at extremely low detectable levels. You can smell that rotten egg
That's
odor.
not the level that I'm smelling, but
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. And that's one of the things that we would offer also is, you know, to come over to your house and provide the testing so you would have the comfort or the knowledge of knowing what was, you know, actually present on your property. Of course, we can't do that for everybody in the county at every time, but any time that we get an isolated or very specific complaint such as yours, that you're saying that you smell it at very specific times of the day, and it's, you know, you're a low-lying level, that we would do those testings to make sure that we have the proper data to approach it correctly.
Kevin, do you have a time frame for any of this? How much longer we're going to have to deal with this before we take drastic measures?
What I will say is that, to answer your question, is that I have consulted with our legal counsel to find out what, if any, options, certainly that the county would have, if for some reason they can't be successful in what they're trying to do. We need to give them a chance to see if they can mitigate this. And you know, if you go back and remember the 2018 hearing that was held in Chesterfield for Article 7, there's specific things that the applicant had to meet as a threshold to get a permit. One was that they would not be hazardous to the community, and it's a little more of a definition than that, legal definition. Into the environment. And so those are the things that we're being prudent on, to making sure that we're looking at. But I think, again, they're making a good faith effort to try and figure this out and get it done. So.
Are you taking into account that they've only been open since 2018 and we've been documenting complaints for well over a year and we're only in 2022?
Everything is being taken into consideration, absolutely.
So that, I mean, that makes a big difference. How much more of this problem has gone on since the documentation started taking place? So how much more do we need to suffer?
As I said, we're looking at all options.
Again, David, you guys are saying that you're taking voluntary measures. Have you considered daily cover instead of weekly cover?
We have to consider that, yes.
Why isn't it happening?
Until we can finalize whatever remediation process that we have, the operational practices that we have in place are compliant with the current regulations. We wanted to make sure that we could find the source, identify it, remediate it, and then we're going to hone our operational practices, whether, I don't know if it would turn into daily cover, but maybe a smaller work face or something to that impact where less is exposed to the environment.
I'm going to ask a question. Someone had brought it up to me that adding lime during the cover could be also a remediation to change the chemical breakdown when sheetrock is exposed to water. Is that something y'all have heard of, done any research on?
Yes, we heard that as well. Butch and I are working on exploring that to see if we can get any success with that.
Is it just me, or is this stuff that should have been going on 6 months ago? I feel like daily cover is a minimal
When you say
attempt.
6 months ago, it's alluding that, to the fact that we haven't done anything, and we have been doing things on site. Gauging the effectiveness, I get, is subjective. It's subjective to whoever's, on that side of the fence, so to speak. But at the site, we've seen improvements with what we detect as noticeable odors on site through the remediation processes that we've had in place since we first were made aware of the complaints in last fall. So it's not, I don't know if it's a matter of being able to solve it in 6 months, but we have been working on it
No,
for
we
6
just don't
months.
expect it to get worse like it has been. And I can make it look like I'm tying my shoe and not be tying my shoe. That's my point.
Well, I can assure you that we are working on it.
I think there's, I don't know the answer to this, but maybe someone would. Does the H2N gas affect vegetation, gardens in the area? Is that something that we know if that has any effect on that? Does anybody answer that question? We don't have an expert for that one, so we'll have to get back to whoever that asked that question. Make sure you send your contact information in through the portal so that we can get an answer for that.
Can you explain a reason for the different types of smells that we're getting? Because it's been insistent that it's H2S without H2S testing to confirm that. So if we're smelling sulfur this day and feces the next day,
So clarification, we
What are the
have been
different
testing for H2S on site. So when you say there's not been testing, we have been testing for it on site. We do have some ambient air testing to make sure, again, to protect the safety of our workers. We've tested the perimeter at different times to make sure the gas, if it was evident, is not moving off site. So just want to be clear that we are testing on site.
your workers seem to be more important than the others.
Pardon me?
Your workers seem to be more important than others, though, is the point.
We're starting at
So
this.
again, can you explain a reasoning for the different types of smells that we're smelling? Because H2S gas, it has been made clear, is a sulfur egg type smell. But if we're smelling what smells like I'm gonna step in dog mess on my floor in the middle of the night,
If I were
what's
to
that?
if I were to comment on any other odors, it would be purely speculative. I wouldn't know. We don't experience any other odors on site.
So then perhaps, we know that it's not happening on site. We're aware of that.
No, what I said is we're not experiencing any other odors. She alluded to the fact that there's other odors
There is
that-
other odors, so my.
Right.
So from a DEQ point of stand, or engineering, or whichever, what other gases should we be testing for then if it's not just this sulfur smell? Because there's other things, which has made people speculate that there's garbage going in there, or porta-john remnants, or whatever it may be, but are there other gases that should be being tested for that are inclusive in landfill off-put?
If you don't mind, can I just address the, other types of materials such as MSW or things that we are not permitted to accept on site that is not being dumped on site. We've had code enforcement, we've had numerous inspections in residual in the wake of the complaints that we received from the community. We've had inspections that have verified that we're not dumping municipal solid waste or anything that we're not permitted to dump on site.
So what I'm saying, though, is if you're not taking that in, what you are taking in is putting off more than an odor of rotten eggs. So is there any other gases that should be tested for? Because methane is being tested, but we're not having a problem with methane. We're having a problem with H2S. H2S is not included in your requirements. So is there any other gases that would be off-put that would produce different smells that we should be testing for? Because if we get rid of H2S, but we still smell feces, problem's not remedied.
Well, I think one of the things we can suggest in the odor management plan is perhaps testing for other things to see if anything else is detected.
That's what I'm thinking, but so what would you test for, though? How do you go about figuring out
I'm sure
what
that,
you-
that this is not the first landfill
Right.
in the United States that's had odor coming out of it. And so I would imagine if we look at, and DEQ probably has some information on this, I'm sure, that of what other types of things can be tested for, what type of equipment is available to do those testings. I'm sure that we can come up with a list of things that could come out of a commercial landfill that could be tested for.
Okay, I was hopeful that they would be able to provide that.
And I'm not sure who wants to give this answer, but what's the telephone number for people to call to complain? That's a question that someone's asked, and so they want to know what number or email address. I'll give them, you can do an option of a number or email address if you don't have a number, but you should. If people want to call in a complaint, what number do they call and or email address do they send it to? I think that's an important question.
I can try and answer that. So I think the best approach for submitting an odor complaint so that multiple people can receive it, and the people that need to receive it, would be sending an email. And right now is what most folks are doing is they'll send our solid waste inspector an email. They'll copy me on a lot of those. They'll copy David Valdez on a lot of those. And Mr. Carroll's receiving a lot of them as well. I don't know if Mr. Carroll wants to receive those or not, but I do think at a minimum, it needs to be DEQ and the landfill. And so with that, Doug Macidi, our solid waste inspector, my name's Sean Weimer. Those would be the proper folks to address complaints at DEQ, and then the landfill, whoever they think is the best person to receive the complaints.
Well, let's make it a little easy. Is there an email address, or is there a website they can go to get those email addresses to be able to click on it and send a complaint?
There you go. Good idea.
Well, they're going to post it on the Upper Magnolia website. That's a good idea.
So going back to the emailing preference for notifying you guys of the smells, what's a good time frame to get a response?
I would say within 24 hours.
All right. And going back to the investigations, you guys have talked about the previous line of questioning. When you do the internal investigations, are those available to the public to see the results?
I believe we've shared with a few of the residents the findings, but yes.
Going to go on a website for everybody to see?
If you want to take note of my email address, you could email me. I could forward it directly to you. You could stop by the facility. I could show you in person if you choose to.
So a no for general public access.
We don't have a communication method to reach everybody that we think may want it. If somebody asks for it, we would gladly provide it.
I think that's what we're going to be working on the county side, to provide one particular website where people be able to go to, off of our chesterfield.gov website. We've done this for many other things throughout the community. I'm sure we can come up with one for this and start feeding that information to there.
All right, thank you.
Hello again. Just a quick point of clarification, because Mr. Valdez mentioned that there's incredibly small amounts of H2S been detected, nothing significantly consequential.
No, sir. What I said was the odor is noticeable at very low concentrations.
Right.
That's what I said.
Okay, all right.
Yes,
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because thank you to the testing consultant. He pointed me at the Niosh toxicity data. 0.0000 125 parts per million exposed over 5 hours is sufficient to cause skin and eye irritation. So even if it's a really, really small amount, if you've got H2S collecting in your area, in low-lying areas, even the tiniest amounts are significant enough to cause skin and eye irritation. So I just kind of want to bear that in mind, even if it's really low levels that you're finding.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Let me see if we have anything else online. Go ahead. Come up to the, you don't want the people at home not to hear it.
Somebody was, I think you were talking about how your system, there's a tanker truck that comes at some point and like pumps it out.
That is correct, yes. So through our leachate system is comprised, of course, of all the collection components inside of the landfill that is then pumped into a 500,000 gallon holding tank, which we then pump into 6,000 gallon tanker trucks to be delivered to the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, so I guess the question I have is, how often does that happen? Is it usually at irregular intervals? Because, for example, I know when we get our septic system pumped, you know, afterwards, there's a residual smell. Is it possible that, you know, when it really peaks the smell, it's when that's taking place? Have you noticed on-site the smell is stronger when the pumping is taking place?
So the tank itself, the holding tank, we pump it as it rains. Of course, if it's not raining, there's nothing to pump. So when the water hits, that's the leachate collection system. So we plan in advance for a rain event, and then we haul the leachate from there. As far as odors related to the leachate, there has been some odors related to, that we've noticed in the leachate. It's not a consistent odor, but we have noticed that when we're loading the truck or it's leaving, that there is an odor.
I was just wondering because, you know, if we do have some kind of community site like Kevin's talking about, maybe, you know, when you know these times are going to take place, letting the community know that. Because I know one of the days that the odor was very strong was right around Thanksgiving. And a lot of the comments on the community page were, you know, I don't want to have my family over for Thanksgiving if the smell is still lingering. So if you do anticipate times when the odor might be worse, communicating that to the community so that we can kind of plan around it, expect it, know it's coming, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, I see that we're approaching the 8:30 hour. We had scheduled this to be, I think, an hour and a half to 8:30. I really want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and sharing their thoughts and with great questions, great points that were brought forward. I really hope that this is something that can be solved sooner than later for the community. And I am, as I said earlier, we are going to be working within the county to develop our own resources to assist DEQ, at least with the landfills that we have in Chesterfield County, so we can be proactive on our end, and we will be keeping track of what the odor management plan looks like, and I hope that we'll have a website up and running as soon as possible. I'd have to, I don't know what the capabilities are for that and how quickly we can do it, but that's something I think we're going to do sooner than later. And if you end up going to our website and have suggestions or questions, make sure you ask them so we can make sure we put the best information and the best product forward for the community. And with that, if no one else has any further questions, again, I really want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I want to thank you both for coming to the community tonight, and the other representatives from DEQ for coming. And I want to thank our sheriff's deputies for being here tonight in the room. Thank you, and good night.